Hello and welcome back to Steampunks, the GameSpot show where we go through the last 7 days of Steam new releases and tell you our favorites.
We do.
I'm Edmund Tran.
I'm Jess McDonald.
And lots of good games this week.
So many good games. One of which was Far Lone Sails. So this is a really gorgeous side-scroller that's basically about maintaining your vehicle in a kind of post-apocalyptic environment. You find yourself in this kind of bleak, limbo, inside-esque environment where you appear to be the last survivor and hop in an old steam-powered vehicle. And basically you want to keep moving forward, work to keep it functional through hazardous weather, obstacles, and increasingly complicated puzzles. As I mentioned, this game is crazy reminiscent of Inside. Music is used deliberately and sparingly, and it's often a tool to let you know you're on the right track, because other than that, there are no indicators of how you should proceed or how you should use anything to do with your vehicle, so you really need to learn by doing. It's really effective and really nice to see a game that trusts its players. One of the really interesting things I like is there's no fabricated enemy, so you are in what appears to be the post-apocalypse, but there's no zombies, there's no evil overlord situation like there is in Inside, and instead you're just motivated by trying to survive and trying to move forward, which is really nice.
So it's a peaceful game.
It's a peaceful game, but what you are fighting against is the environment and the stress of making sure your vehicle can keep going. So there are a couple of ways you can do that. You can stock it with energy, so it moves forward through a locomotive system, and it also has sails on top of it, and other things that you can add to it along the way. The environments are absolutely beautiful. I love the look of this game. Your protagonist is also really adorable, and one of the things that's a really nice touch is you don't have to worry about fall damage. If you're ever coming down from a height, her skirt just floats whenever she comes down, which is really cute.
Wait, can you die in this game? Like, can you run out of energy?
You can run out of energy and then you just get stuck. But this game isn't a roguelike. It wants you to move forward and it auto saves a lot. I was actually really overcome at the end.
Did you cry?
I did cry. I cried quite a lot. It's kind of this feeling of relief and sadness and exhaustion. In my opinion, the puzzles that come up are just hard enough, and interpreting what's going on from the environmental clues is intriguing. Initially, the slow pace that kind of serves as cutscenes when you're just going from place to place, or you don't have to worry too much about an environmental, has it bothered me, but it really does become almost like a meditative process, making the loop from your engine button to your steam valve so the steam doesn't overload, back to your fuel depository, up to the sails and back again is kind of a nice little process. One thing to be aware of is the runtime is really short. It's 2 to 3 hours long, so this is a $15 game, which I feel like is totally worth it, but if you want more bang for your buck, that's something to be aware of. That said, this is probably my favorite game I've played on this show so far. It is so touching, it delivers a ton of heart without trying too hard, and it has a lot of interesting moving parts.
Alright, so that game didn't have anybody chasing you at all,
No.
but the game I played had lots of people chasing you all the time, and it's your problem to deal with.
Yeah.
This is Framed Collection. As the name suggests, it's a collection of 2 games called Framed, Framed 1 and 2, and they're both puzzle games that revolve around the same concept. So that's arranging a collection of comic book panels to get different outcomes. The gist of the narrative is that you're some kind of nameless thief, and you're trying to elude the police and not kill yourself in the process, and by default, each puzzle page of sort of comic frames has you die or get captured or something like that. So you might have already played this on smartphones. It came out a while ago, and most famously Hideo Kojima of Metal Gear Solid fame called it his game of the year in 2014. So what you do with the game is you play with the order of the panels to see what happens to the protagonist as he encounters the different objects and the different frames in sort of different orders. And the ultimate goal is to get the protagonist to the last panel and get them to go to the next page. And it's definitely satisfying when you actually hit the correct solution and sort of work it out. One thing that Framed Collection adds to the games is a fast forward button that lets you zoom through the panels, which it didn't have on smartphones, so it makes sort of experimenting a little bit more bearable. And eventually these puzzles add in more mechanics, so you'll get panels that can be either used horizontally or vertically. You get the ability to sort of move panels while the guy or girl is still running through them, and you might get the ability to sort of manipulate the actual environment that they're running in, so like turning the hands of a clock to use them as a platform. The game looks really great, has a really strong presentation, and the animation is very nice to look at, and the jazzy soundtrack really rounds that out. It doesn't cost a whole lot. It's only $10 on Steam, and it's also on Switch, so if you like the look of it, it's a pretty worthwhile impulse buy.
That sounds pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
I mean, I know it's straightforward because I played it. What is not straightforward is the second game I played this week called Omen Site. But it is a great time. It's an action murder mystery, which is a genre you don't hear about too much, where the world is about to end. In fact, it has ended. And you play as the Harbinger, who needs to save the world before it's doomed to this super demon Vodin. So you'll dig into the final days of 4 key characters to discover who killed the godless priestess, as this witch has sent you on a mission that if you save her, you'll save the world. This is a spiritual successor to Stories, which was a cult hit with a similar look and feel. This is very bright and fast-paced, which is nice. The realm is also populated by dog and cat people who are fighting rat people, which makes you think that it's like really just lighthearted and jokey, but it's actually quite a seriously toned game. And it has a pretty engaging story that I have found personally to be quite addictive. So you'll play through the entire day with any of the given characters, and then when it gets to the end of it, you will take that knowledge with you to go into someone else's day, but you don't really need to worry about racing against a clock. So for every niggling thing in this game, like the many fixed Beyond Good and Evil-esque camera angles that bothered the crap out of me, there's a lot of cool stuff, like when you go hang out with the noble cat general, she judges you for looting chests, and there's some really funny, well-written dialogue. The voice acting is hit or miss. The hits are great, thanks to some really good voice work talents like Patricia Somerset from Breath of the Wild, and writing from Chris Avallone, among a bunch of other heavy hitters. So this is mainly an action game with some light platforming, and fighting is, for the most part, pretty slick and enjoyable, especially since every time you come back to base after you've experienced another day, you'll be able to meditate and put the points you've earned by killing dudes into getting extra levels that grant you new abilities that focus on speed, attack chaining, time manipulation, and just a bunch of brand new things that make fighting way more interesting. Just don't try using a mouse and keyboard. So I am a mouse and keyboard devotee. This game is not suited for it. It tells you at the very beginning not to. You'll also be able to grant these characters the knowledge you gain as you go, so you can skip them ahead to doing different things in their day. So it is rare that you'll be repeating exactly the same story with these characters. And when you do have to do that, the game gives you the option to skip to the critical moment, so you don't have to play through the same stuff unless you really want to. And the entire game will have you jumping between a relatively small amount of different locations, but the sequences for each of the 4 characters aren't too long that it becomes tiresome to see the same enemies in the same areas. So this one is $20, which is a pretty good time if you're into these kind of games where you just kill a bunch of dudes using different abilities. And the story is actually more engaging than most games I played from this genre, so I would definitely recommend it if you're into this kind of thing.
Cheese was well aged, but truth to be told, a cage is a cage.
Well, killing dudes with a bunch of different abilities is something that I like doing, and I really love doing in this next one, which is called Wizard of Legend. So Wizard of Legend is a very fast-paced dungeon crawler roguelike, where you play a really cool wizard with a collection of different spells to use to kill dudes. The game's description actually calls this game no nonsense, which I find pretty apt. It just gets straight into it. It starts up in this museum area, which talks about the game's different mechanics, like they were like ancient history exhibits, but then before too long you just dump into the magic world and you get to do everything for real, which I quite like. So even though you're a wizard, this plays much more like a brawler or a fighting game. You move really quickly, you attack really quickly, and you have a bunch of different magics that you can fire off very quickly. So it's about sort of comboing and chaining your attacks and abilities. You actually have a few different slots to assign your arcana abilities to. There are apparently over 100 unique abilities that they're split into different elements, and each also has its typical vulnerability to one another. So water is weak to lightning, and it's strong to fire, for example. So from the get-go, your arsenal is very customizable. You can change all your attacks and abilities. You have slots for your basic attack, your dash move, and a couple for your standard spells, and your signature ability, which is kind of like a standard spell, but also doubles as your ultimate ability when you kill enough enemies to power it up. The progression kind of looks like this. You go down into a randomly generated dungeon, you explore it and try and clear it as much as possible before fighting a boss and then getting access to the next level. And every 3 stages you do, you'll take on one of the major 3 elemental council members who are basically the big bosses. In terms of its roguelike structure, there are 2 currencies that you collect as you go. There are gems and there are coins. So gems are persistent between runs, and coins are only good for that run. Gems are used to buy stuff like new spells and stat boosting equipment in the shops that appear before you set out on a run, and you permanently get to keep all those things, while coins are used to buy shit in dungeon shops. It's also on Switch and other consoles as well as Steam, which is great if you like to play games on the train like me, and it will run you about $16. So this is one I would definitely recommend if you like action games.
Sweet! Well, that is everything we've got for this week. Do let us know if there's any games you had your eye on for the last week or the week coming up that you think we should check out. My name is Jess McDonald.
I'm Edmund Tran.
And we will see you again next week.